I'm thrilled to be speaking with His Excellency Nestor Mendez, Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States. Ambassador Mendez is in the process of transitioning out of that role, and he has been speaking with Lacelia, Kendall, Gloria, Paula, and Gina over the last few weeks in his office off camera. But today, he and I will be having a chat because we've collaborated to present and to honor his legacy in the form of a multimedia package. And these videos will be part of a book with QR codes. Ambassador Mendez, after a decade of distinction, we feel pleased to honor your legacy. And I want to thank you for joining me today in this chat.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's quite an honor. I thought I was going to be a little nervous, but it's exciting.
I know, because you see, you've worked with some of these ladies, some for 17 years, some for 10 years, and me, well, at least I've known you for a while, but I've worked with you as an advisor for almost 21 months now.
Almost 2 years.
Oh my God. Time runs by so quickly. But just to give some context, Ambassador Mendez is a former ambassador of Belize to the White House and former permanent representative before the Organization of American States. He was elected as Assistant Secretary General in 2015 and for a second term in 2020. So this is really a decade of distinction. And Ambassador, I'm going to jump straight into the first question. I know you transitioned from a small mission, the Embassy of Belize. What was your experience? Specifically, what were the key differences you noticed in terms of operational scale and challenges? And additionally, what were the most significant lessons you learned during that transition and how it has shaped your approach to leadership?
Wow, quite a bit. Okay, so at the Embassy of Belize, the embassy is both the bilateral mission covering our accreditation to the White House and also the permanent mission to the Organization of American States. We also had additional responsibility as non-resident High Commission to Canada, covered from Washington. So it was a very loaded responsibility at the embassy and a very small staff, which is the reality of almost all the Caribbean embassies and missions in Washington, D.C. We had to divide our time between our bilateral representation and our multilateral obligations here at the OS. And having a small staff forces you to be involved in every level of the operation. So as the ambassador, I used to write my own speeches. I used to get involved in administration. I used to do some consular work when there was need to do that. And then we also had the element of servicing the community directly all the time. So that constant engagement with the community, which is so necessary for every country, but especially the smaller ones, were also there. So the scale, we had like maybe 7 people in total, including the driver. So for me to the driver, all of us, we were like 7. And then I come to the OS and the scale is so different. It's huge. And whereas at the Embassy of Belize, I was already pretty comfortable and pretty exposed to pretty much the entire pyramid of the operation, here it was a learning process. Now, I had been working with the OS for almost 15 years before I was elected as Assistant Secretary General, first as an alternate representative, then as the permanent representative. And so I was pretty familiar with the political side of the operations, but not the implementation side from within the Secretariat. So in the Permanent Council, in the political bodies, in CD, you do all the negotiations, you set out the mandates, but then you just send them off. And then somebody in the Secretariat has to go and make a reality the mandates as much as possible that are coming from the political bodies. That part I was unfamiliar with, although I knew a lot of people, the technical people from the OS, because of my many years here and because of the need to interact with them regularly for many things that was happening with Belize. But I wasn't prepared for the scope. And so one of the first challenges was learning to delegate because, that hands-on, very direct approach that I had implemented at the embassy, which had worked very well for me, here was different. I had to learn to delegate. I learned to trust the technical experts. I realized that we have some exceptionally talented and experienced individuals working in the General Secretariat with valuable experiences, and basically, some of them have seen everything. And so, realizing this tremendous wealth of experience, of expertise that's there, that really alleviated my load. That and the fact that I realized very quickly that you cannot be an expert in everything. So the footprint of the organization, the menu that we cover is so diverse, everything from climate change to border security to cyber security to preservation of democracy and election observations and human rights and everything in between. So you cannot really be an expert in such a wide range of things. The good thing is we have people with that expertise. So I learned to trust them. And of course, my responsibility is to listen to them, make the final decision, and add the political messaging that needs to go with the technical messages from the Secretariat. So that was some learning.
Well, that was a broad range. And that takes me to my next question, because I know it is important to balance your political values with institutional obligations. And you just talk about the vast range that the OAS covers. How have you navigated some of the complexities? And how have you prepared for various scenarios that can come up at any given time? And what insights have you gained from relying on the staff? Because you just said that there's such, a diverse range of staff with technical capacities.
So we have institutional obligations. We are bound by the charter of the organization. In the Permanent Council, the rules of procedure govern how the political bodies are managed. But these are basic guidelines. They are guardrails, so to speak, that enable us to manage the process of the political decision making among member states. They are the ones who set the mandates. They are the ones who set the tone and the direction, and we have to implement. Now, on any given complex political issue, there are many sides to it. And being able to navigate, remaining within our institutional structures, yet trying as much as possible to bridge those differences. Sometimes it's not possible. Most of the time, it can be done if there is goodwill. What I have learned is that we are all humans. It doesn't matter the seniority of an ambassador around the table, or how young a person is negotiating for another state. We are all humans. And so the important thing is focus on the issue, not on the person. And that makes it easier to navigate. We're not enemies. We're representing different interests. That I learned when I was sitting at the Belize seat in the Permanent Council. Trying to manage that process from the other side was quite challenging, but exciting. It's exciting because at the end of the day, the representatives here represent the interests of their states legitimately. And therefore, it is exciting to navigate, to manage the process where you can help them come closer together to a point where, they can issue a mandate that is doable for the General Secretariat to implement. And we have to help that process. We help with the experience we have in the staff. We help with, doing research and precedent setting and looking at other experiences that have worked. So those are things that you have to learn on the job.
And speaking of mandates, I know one of your substantive role as Assistant Secretary General is being Secretary to the Permanent Council and also to the General Assembly. So since you've been in office, I think you would have managed about 10 General Assemblies?
Yes. This morning, I was thinking, 10 years has gone by so fast. And if you think in very general terms, we will be working by the time I leave in July with about 40 different chairpersons of the Permanent Council.
Wow.
Remember, it's every 90 days there's the switch.
Switch, yes.
And so um, there are 4 chairs every year, times 10,
Yeah.
that's 40. 40 different personalities, different approaches. Um,
Different things going on in the region at those times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And different experiences, different backgrounds. But that's what makes this work exciting. You know, keeping sight of the fact that what we are doing at the end of the day is for our people to improve their lives, to consolidate peace, to secure democracy, to secure development, to ensure development. And so that process of managing those differences in personalities, in approaches, in experiences, but not losing sight of the ultimate goal. That is exciting.
Well, talking about excitement, do you have any anecdotes you want to share from any of the GAs, whether it's the first one or?
The first General Assembly I had to manage was in the Dominican Republic. And the construction had been delayed. They were building a brand new conference center. And up to the day when we arrived and starting to set up, they were finishing painting some of the rooms that were going to be used for bilateral rooms, moving furniture around, that sort of thing. So it was all very new in a very new setting. And it was my first exposure on the other side of the table because I had been going to General Assemblies for 15 years before that as a delegate. You know, so getting there before everybody, making sure that everything is in order and ready to move, that is a whole different ball game. There have been exciting moments, you know, especially when elections are taking place. Everybody is focused. In Cancun, in Mexico, they had the General Assembly in this all-inclusive resort that was far from everything. And those were the times when the political issue of Venezuela was very hot on the table. And the animosity, the tension, the inability of certain delegations to be able to move forward on issues, very real issues, because, you know, I mean, you look at the political tensions, and more or less some of them can be interpreted through the ideological spectrum. But at the end of the day, those are based on real national interests. You know, so if I have good relations with Venezuela, for whatever reason, you know, I am not prepared to give those up because somebody else sees things differently. So these are real national interests and something that you have to learn. So each one of those has been a learning experience. And each one of them has been memorable. There have been so many experiences. I really would have to start looking at photographs to trigger trigger my memories.
And I remember vividly, and it was during COVID. It would have been then your first virtual General Assembly. Tell
Indeed.
us a little about that, because I mean, the COVID pandemic was something that none of us foresee.
Yeah. So the OS was shut down on the 13th of March of 2020. That was right after the elections, the re-election of the SG and myself, and we were forced to go home. We had to. Then we realized immediately that the need for the political bodies to keep operating became an urgency. Because where else will you start talking about finding solutions for the emergency, the global emergency, the regional emergency? People were dying. You know, how else could we meet? And then the deliberation started, and my office clearly was at the epicenter because we run the political bodies. And so having to think how we will connect everybody from their homes. It's, for me, in my mind, the way I had conceptualized it is, okay, the Permanent Council in the Simon Bolivar still needs to meet. Only thing that has changed, each delegate went home and they took their chairs. So how do we connect all of these chairs, these workstations across the DMV in a way that functions using technology that we had not tried, we had not used? Um, how to select a platform that enables streaming of 4 simultaneous languages. Remember, we have to operate in the 4 official languages. But before we could get to the operational aspects of the meeting, a decision had to be taken that a virtual meeting had the same legal validity as a meeting in person. So even before you meet, you have to agree that this meeting is valid, that it's legal, that it has decision-making capacity. So that took a little while. And then the adjustment to the reality of the virtual world. We managed the migration of the entire OS meeting system into the virtual world using the Kudo platform. And it took a while for people to get adjusted. You had some ambassadors with tremendous experience, many, many years as diplomats, as ministers, as business people, as lawyers. But some of them had not had the need to turn on a laptop because all of their lives they had people to do this for them, and setting your laptop. Now you're home alone. You're lucky if you have, somebody in the house who can help you. Adjusting the camera angle, realizing that before you move from where you're sitting or whatever you're doing, you have to turn off the camera. And there were all kinds of anecdotes about those dates. But the resilience of our people is frankly remarkable. And within a few months, uh, everybody was practically an expert. People used to log in early. I used to log in very early because it was important to me that when people connect, the only thing you have connecting you with your colleagues is the screen. It was important to me that when they connect, I am there to greet them. This is the Permanent Council. We're still functioning. The only difference is you're at home and I'm at home, but work will have to continue. So I would log in early, greet everybody as they connected. We used to do the testing of the cameras, the testing of the microphones at the beginning of every session, because failure of technology could be misinterpreted. You know, there was once during, I think it was a meeting of the Permanent Council, and there was a vote taking place, and the ambassador lost connection. So he called me on my cell phone, and he said, "I cannot vote. I lost connection. They will skip me." And so I spoke to the chair on screen. I said, "Chair, I just got a call from this ambassador and lost connection, but he has asked me to convey that this is his vote." And that was the one occasion I remember. But after that, there were some questions whether or not that vote was valid. He was not on screen to say what they did. Fortunately, the chair ruled that it's valid. It was a technical glitch. It wasn't an intentional. It was not intentional. And so what we started to do is we started to recommend to delegations that when a vote is coming up, that at least 2 members log on. So if one drops, there is a backup immediately ready to take the mic to request the floor. But those things, you don't think about it. Yes. I remember in the beginning, it was the ambassador of the Dominican Republic who was quite good with technology. And he had insisted before the first meeting, he told me, "I recommend that you do a mock, a dry run, get everybody to connect and see how, just do it once. And we discovered several things that had to be addressed. And I'm glad that, he made this suggestion and that we were able to correct certain things from the very beginning. Things like in order to confirm who is attending the meeting, you have to appear on camera. Otherwise, we don't know. Could be anybody speaking on behalf of your country. You had to appear on camera. You had to speak so we hear you. We had to take attendance, and and um, and then I would do the roll call at the beginning of every meeting. We have these people connected, and we have quorum. Yes, we had to establish quorum. So these are things that we learned, and then the first General Assembly, we had to have elections.
That is true.
So
But it was virtual, the virtual GA, but with elections.
right, and it was at a moment of the pandemic when the conditions were such that they were advising everybody against public gatherings, and you had to go about with a mask, and you had to keep social distance, and a lot of things. And then we came up with an electronic ballot using artificial intelligence. We would have emailed a link to every mission, one per mission with a confirmed email address, and then they would deposit their ballots and send it back. And then there were several firewalls in between to make sure that nobody could see who voted for what. Was not accepted. Some missions simply did not trust the secretariat. They thought that we could either spy on who was who was voting for whom, or worse, change the vote. So
that's a real concern.
well, technology and anyway. So, but we still had to vote, and it still had to be secret. So one day, I was thinking and thinking how we're going to manage this, and near my house, where I live here in Washington, there is a McDonald's, very popular because of the junction where it sits. And I was waiting for the light to change, and people were driving through, picking up food, and then, the light just clicked on. I say, yes, we will do a drive-through voting system. And basically, we have the conditions for that. So we devised a flow where the delegations, the ambassadors in their cars would come in through the side parking lot, drive through that narrow path between the building and the garden, pick up their ballot by the security door. We had people handing it from far in little baskets to avoid any contact. A pencil and a ballot, hand it to you in a little basket from far. The person would go to the front of the building, park in their designated spot, put in their vote, and then and all of this is happening parallel to the meeting running, and the chair has called for a vote. And so, watching on screen, and then the people with their ballots, the delegates would walk into the main building from one of the two side doors, bring down their masks so that we can see who they are on camera, identify themselves, quickly put back their masks, and we had cameras set up all around the lobby. And so, and yes, everybody could see. And then even the ballot boxes were transparent plexiglass, so that nobody could think that that box was already loaded. So, drop in the ballot. We had the scrutineers there as well. Everything was done on camera, and people walked out again. And then we asked them to remain in their cars in case there was need for a second round of voting if there was a tie. And it worked. It worked amazingly, just having to think outside of the box. You have to resolve the situation, and using technology and using the cameras. And one thing that I have to tell you, with very few exceptions, people were willing to cooperate. And for that, I will always be grateful because everybody was stressed out, everybody was worried, but people were willing to take the extra measures that we suggested to them, knowing that it was for the collective well-being, and I appreciate that tremendously. Um, you know, when we were managing the first meetings, there were a couple of ambassadors who would connect from their offices, or even their own residences had some really really drastic firewalls, and so Kudo couldn't connect good to them because of their own protection. And so I know this particular ambassador called me several times. You knock me out of the system again. I said, no. And then I offered to send a technician there. I said, no way I'm giving access to a technician to see about my firewalls. That is a security breach. It was a tense, it was a difficult moment, and people had to get used to technology.
Well, speaking about technology, so that was almost 5 years ago. And now we know that you are in partnership with a cutting edge technology firm. I want you to just walk us through the visionary approach of integrating technology with the organization, particularly regarding the automation and transcription and editing of the minutes of the key political bodies. And what impact do you foresee this having on the organization's efficiency and transparency?
Keeping up with the minutes, the edited form of minutes, has been a challenge for a long time, long before I came to the OAS General Secretariat. But that has been compounded in the last decade or so because the ever shrinking budget, and then this policy that reduction enforced by attrition. So somebody retires, and we're not allowed to fill that post for whatever reason. And so the people we had in the editorial office, all of them were gone. And then we didn't have the staff to keep up with the volume, and it began accumulating a backlog. Um, Last year, and it had always weighed on me that needs to be addressed. But you don't have the money to hire people, you don't have the people to do it. And so trying to find a way to resolve this matter, and we're still working on it. Um, we I began negotiating with an artificial intelligence company that came to us to show what they could do, and we negotiated a contract for $1, and so they agreed to do everything, and the pro quo, the quid pro quo would be that once they have delivered on the completion, the transcription and editing of the minutes, we would, make a presentation about them and what they have done for us to the political parties. I think that's more than fair, So we agreed. We're still working on it with them, but once that process is consolidated, is in place, it could mean a great deal of savings, and also an increase in efficiency and being able to keep up. My initial idea had been that, why don't we, instead of having edited minutes, why don't we have like a curated video library, that could, you have you're researching something, and you put in the search words, and it takes you to a certain date at the Permanent Council, and you go directly to that, and you look at the speaker, and you make a smart search, and it's there. But we still have this rule in the Permanent Council that we must produce edited minutes in written form. So until that is changed, that has to be done. I'm hoping that by the time I demit office in the 11th of July, we would have, if not completed it, substantially advanced it, so that the backlog is drastically reduced. And we've also been working on the modernization, the upgrade of the IDMS system for the management of documents, which was also so outdated. It was a system that was created in-house and managed for a long time in-house. But the programs, everything is so outdated, it had to be upgraded. And so last year we were fortunate that the funds were approved, and that is moving very quickly along now. We're also using artificial intelligence to do some quick translations of some documents, which still need to be reviewed, but it's a big improvement. Um, those are the little things that I think the OS has to move into. Um, the direction that comes from the political bodies start using new technology to increase efficiency, but they but then there is no guidance on what exactly do you want to to occur. Will you provide the funds for the purchasing of the software? And that's where the pushback starts. Um, I don't think we have a choice about embracing the new technology that is out there, embracing artificial intelligence. It has to be done. The organization needs it. Everybody is doing it. It really helps. It lessens the workload. It makes things move faster and increases transparency, which is a very important commodity in an organization like the OIS.
I want to switch gears a little, and I mentioned at the top of the interview that you have been speaking with a lot of ladies. And I want to talk about your commitment to gender parity and leading by example, especially considering the fact that your office is primarily made up of women. How does that dynamic influence your leadership agenda and the decision-making process?
You know, you cannot be talking about we should do this and we should do that and not do it. And so when we talk about, you know, um, empowering, opening more opportunities for women, giving them this space at a certain level to operate, to be more visible in the organization, that is something that should be taken seriously beyond the articulations when we talk about gender parity and everything gender in the political bodies. We have to live, you know, what we preach. We have to do what we preach. I have been fortunate in, you know, having had with me along these 10 years uh, a set of hardworking, dedicated, professional women, a couple guys too, you know, but mostly women. Um, and the different experiences also count. So I don't believe that if just because somebody is a certain gender, they should, you know, automatically occupy certain places. Competency cannot be replaced. You know, I've been fortunate in that these women are supremely, you know, they're really dedicated. They're talented professionals. They're committed, and they're also very protective of the institution and the office, and that is a good thing. You know, unfortunately, in organizations like the OS, uh, it's not a huge organization, but it's not a small one either. And there are intra-office turf battles now and then, and you need to know that you know what's going on, but also that your staff is there, you know, to basically close ranks if there is need to. Hasn't happened yet to us. I'm crossing my fingers it doesn't happen. But having the confidence that you can trust on people, for me that is very important. I have to trust the people who work with me, especially those who are in the executive office. The work we do is delicate. The work we do is not frivolous. People trust us with important undertakings, and sometimes we have to handle material in a very sensitive way. And so, knowing that the people who work with you, you can trust them to behave and to understand the complexities and the sensitivities, for me, that has value. And I'm glad that, the team that has accompanied me has lived up to those standards.
So I also know that you have an open door policy, which contributes to fostering that inclusive working environment. What inspired you to establish this policy, if I can say it is a policy, and how does it reflect your leadership style?
You know, before I came to the OS, I had a same policy at the embassy. And with the staff, certainly, but to a great extent with the Belizean community who would stop by. Sometimes there is an emergency, they don't have time to make an appointment, and they would go there, and if I have the time, I would see them immediately and try to help immediately. I think that constructing artificial obstacles to access is debilitating. I think that we must keep certain formalities, to the extent possible. Let me give you a simple example. Unless I absolutely have to, I don't pick up the phone and call an ambassador directly. I text them before. I have their numbers. Can you speak now, or let me know when you can take a call? And invariably they respond within minutes, and we talk. And I appreciate that they do the same with me. So they would text me, can we talk? Can you call me? And I would do that, But if there is something important happening and they have to call my office to talk to my assistant, who would then find a time to come into my office to check my schedule or check if I can take a call or when I would be available. Come on, certain things cannot wait. And I try to be very independent. I call people myself, and if somebody needs to tell me something, one cardinal rule: don't sugarcoat it. I don't want, a message between the lines. I don't have time for that. Give it to me straight, because no matter how bad the situation or the issue may be, I prefer to know the truth, so I know what I'm dealing with. I don't want for somebody to come and half hint this and half that. I don't get that. I don't get hints. I'm sorry. I don't. Give it to me straight, and we can find a solution. But don't come and half hint at an issue, and then you don't know what it is, so you can't solve it.
Right, which leads to another question I wanted to ask you, because we know you have a laid-back demeanor, and when a matter calls for seriousness, how do you manage to balance your personality with the demands of the role?
Being the Assistant Secretary General is a big responsibility. It's something that I recognized from the time my government decided to present me as a candidate. And, there is I was reading a Bible quote this morning, Ecclesiastes 3:11. There is a time for everything and a season for all activities under the heavens. You know it well, right? A time to reap, and a time to plant, and it goes on. In everyday life, it's the same thing. There is a time to be very serious. But, it's not every day of every hour. Every hour of every day. It's if the situation requires it. Of course, you can be joking when a very serious issue is being dealt with. And showing the respect for the responsibility and for the undertakings that are entrusted upon you, I think that is both expected and the correct thing to do. And so I can be very, very serious. Or, as you know, I can be very easygoing. And that, I think, has allowed people to feel comfortable and to come to me and to, communicate things that otherwise would not be the case. If you isolate yourself somewhere in a corner office and not talk to people, you won't know what is happening, and that's not good business.
So, ASG, I know under your tenure there have been a lot of initiatives, and I want to talk about the now much anticipated Inter American Weeks, the Inter American Week for people of African descent and for indigenous peoples. How did they come about, and what do you think is the future of these programs in the OS?
The first year we were here, Ambassador Prince, we were talking about, the work plan and everything. And she said, every year the US celebrates American History Month. Maybe we should, Black History Month, maybe we should do something along those lines. And we did. She got some help from outside. She has some connections. And then it was a success. The next year, we did another one. And from there, it slowly evolved to the Inter-American Week for people of African descent. Once that was, already accepted and part of the calendar, in a conversation over dinner with my wife, she says, now you have to do something for other vulnerable groups, other groups that require visibility also, like indigenous peoples. And so we started looking at it in the office, and that was also added to the institutional calendar. These are things that took a while for them to take hold and to be embraced. But now they are an important moment in the calendar every year. And what I see as the value to it is that these issues that have to do with Afro descendants and indigenous, they are very scattered throughout the work of the Secretariat. And there are few political spaces where you dedicate the time to look at it in particular. What these weeks provide is that political window to elevate the visibility, to show challenges but also contributions, because our people, the indigenous people, the Afro descendants, have contributed so much to all of our societies. And sometimes we just get hung up on, oh, this is the bad thing that's happening, that is the challenge. It's important to address these issues, but it's also important to recognize what are the contributions that have helped to make our societies better. And so I'm glad that those two were, by resolution of the Permanent Council, fully accepted as institutional events every year. And I'm also glad that last year we were able to get the Budgetary Committee to approve budget line items for some of the basic costs associated, the institutional costs associated with the celebration of these important weeks. Throughout this time before last year, every time the weeks would come along, Lasilia or Kendall, or at the time Jazz, would start calling the missions and asking for contributions. And it takes time and effort, and having that part covered already in the budget, I think is an incentive for it's a start, and you can build around that. If you want to have a nice big opening event, you can build around that, because that requires mostly contributions in kind, and so the funds will be there. I'm hoping, and I will listen very carefully to the acceptance speech of Ambassador Laura Hill, and she said these initiatives will continue. So I'm glad, I'm heartened, and I'm glad that we set in motion these kinds of activities and practices. And talking about inclusivity, it's trying to live what you preach.
And I know the national offices fall under your purview, and they have been instrumental in raising the profile of these weeks as well. I want to give you an opportunity to just talk about the national offices and your leadership throughout the last
The
10
national
years.
offices are a vastly underutilized, extremely valuable asset of the organization. We have presence in, I think we have 29 offices right now. I think a couple of them don't have, a really, really, really downsizing in terms of personnel. Um, but they are our first window to the people in the field. They are the first window that people see, that people can go to if they don't want to go online. And so utilizing them, especially making sure that we have representatives where we have national offices, is of the utmost importance. And I hope that can eventually be done. Um, the national offices, in addition to the normal representational duties they do, they have also become part and parcel of these commemorative weeks. And so they have the literary events. I remember one year an office did a tree planting ceremony, and book competitions, and other events with students. And I think that expanding the menu of positive activities associated with these weeks boosts the week itself, because if I am more interested in academia, and there is an event with students and with professors and with research, I will associate the week with that. If I'm more interested in activism and looking at rights and other pressing issues, I will associate the week with that. And there is space for everything, you know. So the national offices have been very, very helpful in these weeks, but they are, they are there on the ground. They serve a tremendous purpose, and they really need to be boosted.
And talking about that, I want to just jump into what we know about you is that you are a bridge builder, and you have fostered connection through various initiatives, such as working with the Church of Christ of Latter-day, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for change in Haiti. You've worked with the Pan American Development Fund, PADF, and other regional groups such as PAHO and the IACNDR, the Inter-American Committee for Natural Disaster Reduction, right? And along with your engagement with the YABT, the Young America's Business Trust, we know how you feel about youth and entrepreneurship. I want you to just elaborate a little on the impact of these initiatives and share your perspective on creating these vital connections and pathways for progress.
These agencies, the Young America's Business Trust, the Pan American Development Foundation, PAHO, the Inter-American Development Bank, all of them, ICA, Inter-American Institute for Cooperation and Agriculture, all of them are creations of the OAS. They focus on specialized areas, and all of them serve the same constituencies that we serve. Each one of them has their own strength and their own sphere of operations. And I think that to the point where we can work closer with all of them and complement each other, we're not competing. There is need in our countries. There is space for everybody to work without getting into anybody's turf. To the extent that we can bring all of them and complement what they do, I think everybody wins. So, for instance, the Pan American Development Foundation, I am the honorary vice chair of the board. That's by virtue of holding the office I hold. And I've been working closely with them for even before I came to the OAS. When I was ambassador of Belize, I had done some work with them. I like that institution, that outfit. It's very agile. It can move fast from a concept, an idea, to project development, to project implementation, much faster than the General Secretariat can, because we have a larger bureaucracy and we have a longer decision-making process, and we have broader and more dense processes to follow to implementation. They move fast. They move almost like the private sector, and I like that. When it comes to the Young America's Business Trust, uh, I've always had a special place in my heart for young people, especially people who are entrepreneurs and innovators and are looking at the future through a different lens. There is something very special about facilitating that growth, the conversion, the evolution of an idea to a bankable concept, to the implementation, the innovation competitions that YABT does every year throughout the Americas is something that I feel strongly about. It matches some of our best young minds against their peers to see who comes up with the best solutions. There is tremendous optimism and hope and potential in those. And so, to the extent that we can give them the political boost that they require for the visibility, I think that that is certainly an obligation. Apart from the fact that I enjoy it, I enjoy working with them. I think that there is tremendous potential there. Um, and also thinking outside of the box, going beyond the traditional parameters of operation. That is something that we need to do, you know, bringing different partners who you don't normally think as potential partners to solve a problem. That is something that we should be doing all the time when there is need for it. And that's what I have tried to do fairly well. That we have some pretty good experiences to bring immediate help to some women-led single families in Haiti. We matched the Pan American Development Foundation with generous funding from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and the PADF moved to use their established infrastructure to develop some assistance, and that's ongoing. Um, if you're able to alleviate the suffering in one household, it's one household less that is suffering. And so we cannot be waiting for these solutions that change the world all of a sudden. What we can do in a practical way, do it now. You know, people are hungry, people are suffering, people are waiting for help. And so we cannot just focus on, oh, we have to develop something that will solve all the problems. Yes, we can work on that. But in the meantime, let's work on what can be done now.
I quite agree. Ambassador, we know a lot of things about you, and I'm speaking
That
for
sounds ominous.
and I'm speaking for the collective of women in your office. And we know that you have a charismatic approach to diplomacy. You've had informal and relaxed gatherings with some of the permanent representatives, and I know you don't always do it by region. But can you tell us about how that fosters the connection and understanding the diversity among the nations represented here at the OAS?
You know, the Office of the Assistant Secretary General, as Secretary to the Permanent Council and the political bodies, along with the committee secretaries and the personnel in that office, many times we are the first point of contact between the delegations and the Secretariat. And so recognizing the importance of that connection, of the need to have a good relationship with the missions, is something that is not only necessary for doing our job well, but that it improves the functioning of the political bodies. And so one of the things that I instituted when I came to the OS is that at least once a year, sometimes I did it twice a year, I would invite the representatives, the ambassadors, by regional groups first, to my office. Let's have some refreshments without an agenda. We will talk about any issues that you want to talk about in an informal setting, sometimes off the record, sometimes it's not is not necessary. But I found out that even within sub-regions sometimes, there are not enough opportunities for ambassadors to gather informally and exchange views and have a conversation. And I found that extremely useful. And we did it all the way until the pandemic. And then the pandemic disrupted the flow and tried to restart it after the pandemic, but somehow the dynamic had changed a little bit. I think it is very important for delegations and certainly the secretariat to have opportunities to have conversations offline, off the record, informal. Most, I would say 95% of the issues, the decisions that are made in the Permanent Council are not resolved there in the formal hall. They are resolved in the hallways. They are resolved in informal conversations, in calls, in a discussion over coffee. Uh, that is where the real negotiations, the real work happens. And to the point that you can generate these instances for that kind of interaction, everybody wins.
You have often said that every one of us need a little angel. And one of the most charming traditions you've created is leaving Christmas gifts, often angels, on people's desks. Can you share the inspiration behind this thoughtful gesture and what it means to you?
The first Christmas that I spent in this office as Assistant Secretary General, again, my wife, we were having a glass of wine over dinner, and we were talking about, Christmas is coming. Christmas is big for my family. We're very close, and it's a big deal. The decorations, the preparations, the bringing the family together. It is something that you realize my wife and my kids and I, we have been away from Belize. We have been living outside of Belize for a long time. And you realize that if you're away from your extended family, the nuclear family, the bonds get tighter because of need, because there's the emotional protection, there is everything. And so thinking about how we could help transmit the joy of the season to the wider staff. My wife loves decorating for Christmas, and she loves Christmas ornaments in particular. She has a massive collection from all over the world. And people who know her, when they travel somewhere, they know something that will be appreciated is a little Christmas ornament. Um, and then we started thinking, well, she said, what about a Christmas ornament? So, okay, but those, I was thinking of the Christmas balls and, and those, they can be very easily broken, and then we started to think, what more than Christmas, the Christmas spirit, what ornament would be more in line with what we're trying to convey? And she came up with the idea of the little angels for the Christmas tree. And so we ordered the first set of angels from an artisan in Nicaragua. And they were made from a corn husk, handmade, all of them. The following year, we had identified a Haitian, an artisan originally from Haiti, who had a small workshop in the outskirts of Mexico City. And that is where we handmade all of the subsequent orders for angels. And the idea had been that every year it will be a different angel representative of a different region, of a different ethnic group, of a different culture. And so if you look at the collection of angels that we gave over the years, you have a black angel, you have a mariachi angel. When the General Assembly was held in Mexico that year, we gave mariachi angels. We have angels in indigenous wear. And the last one that we ordered was during the pandemic, and it was a little angel with a mask. And that angel was holding a little globe in her hand, and it's like the whole world needs an angel right now to protect them. And it's one of those things that, even now, when I walk by people's offices, sometimes I see they have their little collection, and people would show me in a very, I don't know, it's a nice feeling that it's a gesture that is appreciated because of its meaning. After all, everybody needs a little angel to watch over them, So I think that it's a beautiful tradition. It's important to show appreciation. I think that, and if you've been around my office for long enough, it's something that I always mention, that we do not say thank you enough. We take for granted the contributions that are made by our people, sometimes at great sacrifice, at great input of time, of effort. And we don't show appreciation enough. And that's across. That's across. And so, even a small gesture, it doesn't have to be every day because it becomes impossible. But a small gesture, a little, gift around the Christmas time, just because we appreciate what you do. Don't tell you every day, but I want you to know that what you do is valuable and we appreciate it. And that is part of my formation. That's part of how my family is. That's how we grew up. It's important. We're Catholic, so it's important to give thanks. Everybody who goes to church knows that.
And I think it's really looking at the man behind the title. And if you'd allow me, I just want to ask you to share with us, a little bit of your upbringing. We know you're from a hardworking family in Belize. You're bilingual. And for us in your office, we know that your speeches are always written in Spanish and English. And you have said that you prefer, if it's a serious topic, that you address it in English. But I want you to just take us back to a little bit of your growing up and the people in your family who've been very influential.
I grew up in a small village in the north of Belize, San Antonio, Rio Hondo, in the Orange Walk district. Geographically, it is 3.5 miles from the Rio Hondo, that is the border with Mexico. And if you want to cross the formal border, you can drive there in about 45 minutes. So it's very close, all the way up north in Belize. Very nice growing up in a small village. My father was a primary school principal for many, many years, most of his life. He was a teacher. My mom was a stay-at-home. We were five siblings, so she had her hands full. And so it was wonderful growing up there in the summers, all the things that you do when you have a little free time. But although our parents insisted that we needed to go to school, we needed to get an education, they also, had a plan B, that if that does not work out, and it's very clear, my sons will not be out there begging or stealing. They have to learn to work. And so we would go to the farm with my grandfather. It's something I've spoken about before many times, and we learned a lot growing up that way, spending, we would go a half day to the farm and spend the afternoon swimming in the river. It's a beautiful setting. But that kind of rural upbringing shapes you in a certain way, makes you appreciate a lot of things, and the proximity to family, to the extended family, to friends. One of the things I really want to do when I conclude my term here is to be able to spend some time fishing in the river. In the river, something I really, really like to do. I have not had the opportunity to do it for a very long time, but I'm looking forward to it. Um, but that kind of family setting uh, prepares you for a lot of things. So you learn to work hard. You also appreciate the value of education because after a particular strenuous day, they will tell you, aha, you see, if you don't study, that's going to be your life, you know? And there's nothing wrong with farming, there's absolutely nothing wrong with farming. But it's the way that it was couched. Um, I love, being around nature, and I think that the idea of planting and watching a seed grow and watching it bear fruit is something just absolutely miraculous. And I have a farm, so when I go to Belize, I spend some time visiting my little farm, and I really I really enjoyed going there and getting some fresh fruits, and it relaxes me. Um, but getting back to my family, that connection with nature, that connection with family, shapes you and it prepares you. But we also realize that, and we try to pass this to our kids. It's important to be close to your family. It's important to show respect. It's important to appreciate the things in life, and it's important to share the blessings. That is also an important part. The rest, well, I grew up speaking Spanish at home, English in school because the entire system is in English, and I was convinced I was bilingual until I was posted my first posting in Guatemala, and I realized that I cannot work in Spanish because my Spanish was very basic. It was, you can go to the shop, you can talk to anybody, you can say a lot of rude things in Spanish, but but in terms of working the working language, it wasn't there. I had to learn it. It took me a while, and now I'm comfortable, clearly. But still, if I have something very important to say, I prefer to say it in English because it's much more precise. And for me, at least, there is uh, less room for misinterpretation.
So I know throughout this you talked about your family and you hinted a little at faith. I want to know what significant role did these influences have on your journey, your decision making throughout your career?
We're Catholic. We grew up in a Catholic household. My brothers and I, we have two brothers, one older, one younger. I'm the second of five, and two girls are the youngest. The three of us, we were altar boys. We used to serve in the church during mass, and you know, and the proximity to the church. My mother has always been a very devoted Catholic. My dad was too before he passed away, and so those are things that remain with you, and it's important to, what I was telling you, it's important to give thanks. It's important to share the blessings. It's important to show respect. Those things are basic things that people take for granted, and it's not as common as it should be. So inculcating those values in our kids, in the next generation of nephews and nieces coming up, is important because you're in a very small way you're contributing to making a better society. It's also important to work hard because nothing that is really worth it is easy to come by. So you have to appreciate the value, the fruits of your hard labor. There is also, virtue in being grateful for that and appreciating it. Apart from that, I think everybody knows last year, um, my family and I, we were blessed by being received by His Holiness Pope Francis. Again, thank you very much to Monsignor Serrano, who helped put it together for us. But it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. My mother was turning 75 last November, and trying to think of what would be a suitable, a fitting gift for for a person like her. And then the idea of visiting Rome, then the idea of, seeking an audience with the Holy Father. And it all came together beautifully. So we will always be grateful for that.
And we, ASG, are grateful for you. We're grateful for all the lessons you've taught us. And we're grateful for your leadership of this great institution that is the OAS, and for all that you've done for the people of the Americas, bringing more rights for more people over the last decade. And we wish you very well in your journey, and we know that we have the opportunity to come to the farm. We'll all take it up, maybe not at the same time, but we'll definitely come to visit you. Thank you so much, ASG.
Thank you. Thank you. I also want to say a very special thank you to several people. I speak a lot about my family, my wife, my kids, my mother. They've been with me. They've been really the anchor in everything I do. It's that foundation there. I'm truly grateful for their support. I'm also, deeply respectful and grateful to the people in the office who have, worked so tirelessly in so dedicated a manner over all of these years. It has not always been easy, but every step has been worth it. And so I'm grateful for their contributions, and to the wider secretariat. I've learned to have renewed respect for all of them, because you see people all the time, but until you start to learn what it is that they do, you realize the impact of their individual and eventually the collective contribution. And to the many friends in the Permanent Council and in the political bodies, I've made lasting friendships, and for that I will be grateful. So thank you for this opportunity. It's hard for me to talk about myself. I'm not. It's not my favorite thing to do, but thank you for this opportunity to share.